I want to invite my colleagues for the next session. I am joined by Adrian Parrott and Delie Wilkens, if you don't mind. Hi, guys. So we're actually moving next to something that is of great is excitement for us because we, as you see this morning, have focused a lot on farmers and agriculture. And everything around that has led us and guide us to what we're about to do moving forward. And that is landowners, Hispanic landowners across the U.S. that are focused on forestry. And to us, it's actually a great opportunity to also test the plans that we started doing enumeration, counting, and outreach, and developing partners. So we have a presentation that I'll let me share my screen. Obviously, I'm not the techie person, but it's coming. Okay, here we go. I wanted to start with the opportunity that we have been given. In fact, I have to say, Adrian and Delie know this, but to many of our folks in our team, as well as the audience, we just recently officially started formalize a phase 2 of a project that we started in 2021. And the project that we are talking about is a program to begin deeper analysis and characteristic studies of Hispanics in forestry across the U.S. And it was because of a grant and a partnership that we started with the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities. Delie is our right-hand contact lead from the endowment, and she is with us today. Her background is very strong, especially with Hispanic community. She's a former Peace Corps volunteer. And Adrian is actually the person that is going to lead this effort as a manager, and he has already done some significant work in connecting with key informants and many contacts across the U.S. In our presentation today, we'll talk in general about what that means, what the mission and the objectives will be, and then also talk from the perspective of the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, what they have done before to get to this place. They certainly have shown their commitment. One of the things that we talked this morning is about the importance of data to make decisions, specifically on outreach. But another thing that is important for data is that we want to make sure that we partner with the right organizations based on their mission and based on their record. And certainly this is an organization that has it and that we can learn from. The other thing that is important for us is to get in programs that promise to have sustainability, that promise to have a permanent focus on Hispanic landowners. Just like we did with the talent development, we're going to continue to sustain it and grow it. The same we have done with the farmers. This is what we will talk about. Just recently, the Forest Service sent out an article that summarized some of the work that was done in the first phase of our project. I want to invite you to connect when you get some of the proceeds of the conference. You'll be able to see some of this links and articles, and the full study is linked there. So I encourage you to go and read it and find, based on a prediction model that was created during the study, where are the high density places that we plan to begin our outreach with the support and the guidance of the endowment, as well as other contacts that you'll be hearing from later. So with the Forest Service support, and you'll get to hear Amadou Diop and others, we are basically leading an effort that is non-existent in the U.S. To create a hub, a trusted hub, to bring leadership, talk and study best practices, and also research these landowners, these Hispanic landowners. As I mentioned earlier this morning, many times when we look at data from farmers, many of the Hispanic farmers are not represented, and they're not part of national surveys as they should be, just because of the limited sample size. So that's one of the things that we want to address. So that's part of this mission. And Adrian and I drew a blank. And
Delie.
well, I was thinking more about our outreach specialists. Thank you. Our outreach specialists, Pedro and others that will be part of this effort, that have worked with us in the outreach to farmers, will be part of that effort. I think that this is where I pass it to Adrian, and we're going to go deep into what we have done and what we're planning to do specifically for this effort.
Okay, thank you, Nolo. Good morning to some, good afternoon to others. My name is Adrian Parrott, and I am the outreach specialist and program manager, one of the program managers at mano-Y-ola. So why mano-Y-ola for this project? Well, we've had extensive experience working with Hispanic farmers during the Hispanic Farm Outreach Project that we undertook in the Southeast in Puerto Rico. So about 6 years ago, we completed an enumeration of Hispanic farmers in the Southeast that identified a high quantity of farmers in a variety of states, but with lower enrollment in USDA programs being reflected. So we reached out, we conducted that enumeration study and followed that up with outreach efforts to connect with farmers, learn what their needs were, what their awareness of USDA programs were, and then turned that into a dynamic outreach strategy that utilized culturally appropriate outreach and regionally in tune outreach to increase participation, close assistantship gaps, and enhance farmers' conservation capacity and skills. Now, we believe that the skills and experiences we gained over the farm outreach program are highly transferable to the realm of forestry. We know that we can create that culturally appropriate and regionally in tune outreach for forest landowners. And we know that we can take things like language and culture that can be seen as barriers to some institutions and turn them into bridges to attract landowners to conservation and forest management. And that's why we at mano-Y-ola are really excited to be taking on this project and working with our partners at the U.S. Endowment. Speaking of which, I'm going to hand it over to Delie now to speak more on the endowment side.
Great. So for many, you might not know the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, so I just wanted to provide a short background for context. So we are a public charity. Basically, we give grants and make investments into programs that support sustainable forestry initiatives, particularly with a focus on rural communities. Our projects are varied. They have included supporting healthy watersheds for forest health, sometimes assisting with minority landowner programs, which we'll hear about a little bit more, to create wealth for communities. We've also done some kind of innovative market solutions for forest products as well. So that's just a small a dip into what we do. But basically, we work with closely with a variety of partners to ensure we can keep working for us as forests for their environmental, economic, societal benefits. Our work is really founded on three main pillars, I would say, that are not viewed as traditional. We try to do what others can't or won't. We like being bridge builders, and we like risk taking. So if you'll go to the next slide. There you go. So how does Hispanic Forest Landowner, the trusted hub that we'll talk about, how does that fit into our mission? And what is at stake for the endowment, essentially? As you'll hear about a little bit later on, the endowment assisted with something called the Sustainable Forestry and an African American Land Retention Program. We assisted with the initiation from that. Essentially, this used sustainable forestry as a way for Black landowners to generate wealth from their land. And in doing so, kind of help curb land lost due to development or other industries. That's not an easy task, as you could imagine. There are a lot of barriers apart from the barriers you usually see, right? Apart from the usual suspects. And we know that simply putting money into outreach and education was not going to tackle the issue. It helps certainly, but instead we focused on three main areas. We wanted to build trust with local Black communities. We wanted to be really clear and upfront about the mutual benefit of the program. And we also wanted to collaborate intentionally to facilitate relationships between government partners, local community groups, and among farmers themselves. So in doing so, Black landowners were able to clear titles to their land, develop management plans or other activities needed to turn their forests into economic assets for their families. So in return, we had people advocating for forests and forest management all across the South, whether to their friends, their neighbors, and within the leadership in their communities, states, even nationally in some cases. So based on the success of SFLR, which is what we kind of normally call it, the endowment and their federal partners thought this same model, might work with other underserved communities. But we needed data first, which is the enumeration you just heard about, and you'll hear a little bit more about as well. And we found a wonderful partnership with Nolo and his entire mano-Y-ola team. And so we're excited to take what we learned in SFLR to Hispanic landowners. There's just one last thing I want to emphasize before I let Adrian talk a little bit more about the hub. SFLR is currently in 8 states. Each of those state networks have different organizational models. They organize as a network, but they have a leadership team that acts as a voice for the larger network. Yet this is not the same organization in each place. The key to their success is the ability of individuals to engage and to build trust with local African American communities. So we want to bring that understanding to this hub. The issues that Hispanic landowners face will not be entirely the same as those of Black landowners. We're well aware of that. And what's more, the issues that Hispanic landowners face in New Mexico, for example, will be different than the issues they face in Washington. So what matters most is building that trust, collaborating, and providing that mutual benefit. So thank you all. I'll turn it back over to Adrian.
Thank you, Delie. One of the reasons, well, there's many reasons we like working with the U.S. Endowment, but one of them is they're like us in that we want to make data-driven decisions. Am I popping up? Am I good? Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure. And so when they approached us with the forestry project, the HFLO project, as we call it, Hispanic Forest Landowner, that's the abbreviation. They gave us the opportunity to kind of look into a blind spot. They wanted to know how many Hispanic forest landowners there are, what is the information that we have on them, and what data is available before we make any decisions about conducting outreach. So we, as a team at mano-Y-ola, worked hard. We interviewed multiple experts in statistics, in forestry, in the SFLR program, and as well as combed through extensive clearinghouses of data, looking for numbers and context that could give us some insight into, who are these Hispanic forest landowners and where are they? And there wasn't much there. We found that overall knowledge gap we could not find a formal count of Hispanic forest landowners, which is appropriate. It's based on Hispanic population growth, and that being reflected in the forestry workforce as well as home ownership growth. It indicates that there are questions that needed to be asked. So we took the data that we had and created a predictive model that projected some 17,211 Hispanic forest landowners in the United States. From that data, we selected 8 high-density states that indicated a high potential for effective outreach and hub development. Now, this is just the beginning. This is another reason why we like the endowment, because they don't want to be prescriptive. Our next step going into phase 2 is to go into these states and begin to interview and work on a phase 2 description of Hispanic forest landowners. We have the numbers right now. Now we need to put a face to the numbers. The first step in that phase 2 is going to be assessing location. We've made evidence-based assumptions about where these landowners are and how many there are. We need to go in and verify that, though, however. We've also made assumptions around location with regards to generational versus emerging states. There are some states that have a longer legacy of Hispanic presence, like those in the Southwest, California, New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona. And then there are those that have emerging populations that don't have as long of a legacy in relativity to the emerging states. Florida, North Carolina, Georgia. We want to understand sort of the relationship between sort of time and legacy and forest land ownership, so as to be able to predict where in the future outreach should take place. We want to again get into the characteristics of who these forest landowners are. What is their representation in the timber industry and the forestry industry? What are their aspirations as landowners? What are the ownership trends? You know, the age, the sex, the overall characteristics that these landowners have. And then we also want to take into account the uniqueness of every state and every region, because we know that there may be some states where wildfires are a key concern, and that will need to be taken into account as we develop outreach. But we also want to be aware of things that may be more common in other states, like New Mexico, with regards to heirs property and land titling issues. So really taking in that uniqueness of every state and every region. And then third, we want to be cultivating those trustworthy points of entry in this phase. So making sure that we connect with successful Hispanic forest landowners that can be gatekeepers. We want to be in contact with local USDA agencies that have a high proportion of Hispanic landowners in their conservation client list. We want to be connecting with NGOs and nonprofits that can give us, again, more context about the areas we're working in. And we want to make sure that we are tapping into the forestry expertise that is available through the U.S. Forest Service and local consulting foresters as well. Now, I've said a lot there. If we can go to the next slide. In summary, our goal, our main priority with the HFLO Hub is to increase and improve outreach efforts and increase knowledge and understanding of U.S. Hispanic forest landowners. Everything we have done and everything we are going to do will revolve around this priority. So thank you. I'm going to pass this on to Nolo Martínez, Dr. Nolo Martínez.
Thank you, Dr. Adrian. I appreciate that. I want to just summarize and perhaps more importantly talk about some of the actions that we would like to take and to aggressively address some things that are important for us to create the type of sustainability that we want. I think that it has, as you can see in a conference like this, many of the questions and many of the attendees are very interested in a number of different subjects. This one happens to be one where we know there are some very important partners that we can bring in the form of an advisory council. We also want to make sure that we represent the endowment, the Forest Service, and other groups that are important to this dialogue, not only because it is important to be open about this, it's because we may actually not see some things that are important in the implementation of the program. We want to be accountable, so we want information to flow. So establishing an advisory council will be very important, specifically for those that are not necessarily represented in many of these pockets of areas, whether it is the four most important counties in New Mexico, where you can find almost up to about 900 landowners. Conduct comprehensive face-to-face assessment is something we did, is something that we will continue to do, is something that bring us to the doing, to the correcting mistakes, to populate some empty blank areas where we need to have information that represents the Hispanic landowner much better. Ongoing reporting and findings is something that obviously is a expectation of the endowment, but it's also an expectation from us to see how we move the needle and how we have progress on the deliverables, as well as the information that the advisory council needs to get often for them to help us. And you'll hear some panel members on the next session that would certainly be candidates and great members of the advisory council that I think we need to feed them with data. This leading a comprehensive and culturally appropriate outreach for nonprofits. I mentioned earlier, I think nonprofits that serve Latinos have to be part of this process. We need to engage them, empower them, bring them to this process so they can do the work where they live, because we cannot get to all of these places. And virtual could be okay for something like this, but not in the work that we want to do. There are some things that we begin to learn about what SFLR dealt with. We have some great informants like Sam Cook and many others, Delie, Alicia Kramer, that have talked about what some of the themes and issues are, like heirs property. So we want to make sure that we target that as it relates to Hispanics. And we do know that there are some areas of work there. Support USDA Hispanic outreach capacity. We know that that's something that in some cases is not where it needs to be. So we would like to be that medium, that broker. Develop an educational curriculum, obviously, is part of what we do. We will be including students, and I'm not going to look now, but if I look at my ad, you will convince me that yes, we put in this an effort to get interns, just like we did with agriculture, to make sure that we get the young future professionals involved in this effort of building a better curriculum here. And then the last two are incredibly important, which is we want the Hispanics to be well represented in the National Woodland Owner Survey. And because of issues of small samples that cannot get there, I think we can actually facilitate that, be a catalyst for that, and then be sustainable and continue this process. I'm going to stop there, and I know we have some time for questions, and I will ask my colleagues to join me on video, and I'll open the floor for any questions that you may have for us.
I see one question from a participant. The question is for me, Mr. Parrott. Could you go further into what were the numbers of farmers reached out to for USDA programs? What types of outreach were used, and were there any barriers? And if there were barriers, what were they? Well, I can speak on some of that. I was in charge of Louisiana and Mississippi for the farmer outreach program. And I think we reached in the neighborhood of 100 agricultural business owners, because there were a lot of nursery owners in there as well. And with regards to getting them involved in USDA programs, there were a variety of issues that popped up. I have to give it my hats off to Louisiana, because I found a lot of conservationists and FSA professionals that were really willing to go the extra mile, particularly one in St. Tammany Parish. They went above and beyond with a strawberry producer. I was trying to get enrolled for a EQIP program. But there were some barriers that we just couldn't get over, like when it came to titling issues, informal land lease agreements. Those were a big one that stopped a lot of good work in its tracks, and those are hard to resolve. And something we're working on curriculum currently to sort of inform farmers on how to create wills and create titles so as to avoid these issues in the future, because they can really be a killer. Nolo, I don't know if you've got any other barriers.
Sure. I mean, I think that you're right on the answer. We focus on states like Florida. We focus at the beginning on the Southeast. The success in terms of the approach that we took was that obviously we did every event, farm demonstration, meeting where we had someone on the ground connecting with these communities, identifying the key leader farmer, key leader landowner, opening doors, finding out what was the ideal time where we could actually be successful in getting the most folks. It was important for us because there was a question earlier that many of you may have not gotten, but is this idea that a lot of the business happens 8 to 5, but that's not the life of the farmer, that's not the life of the landowner. So finding those opportunities either at night or in the weekends, barriers was one of the questions. One of the barriers is that we have some really good people that obviously are very important to our work. I mean, in Florida, the person we had is now working as a right-hand person for the Secretary of Agriculture in the state. And so, we have some good talent. Sometimes they come, sometimes they go. And so certainly from our administrative side of things, those are things that we needed to be aware of. But thank you for the question. I don't know if there is another question from the audience. I want to add one other thing, because I think it's important, and this is really critical. The Forest Service, just like many of the agencies, are quite big, and they have all kinds of different departments and different groups. I need to actually say how important it is for us to have a partnership with folks like the Endowment that have done this work with the Forest Service for so long, that can open doors for us of understanding. And they have had patience with us, and we have to understand that a lot of times that kind of knowing takes time. So I can see how many farmers are overwhelmed if we were for some time in terms of understanding the culture, and we will understand, and we will build some strong partnership. But it's so important to have this ability to have a team that is more than just you with the agency. Is just critical. So anyway, I don't know if Delie, you want to add your 2 cents to that, but
yeah, no, that's great, Nolo. I think we were talking about this the other day, and this applies to Hispanic forest landowners. This applies to, the SFLR network. It's almost like a little square that you go around, where it's like you begin with agency partnerships, and then you have the role of organizations like the Endowment, who really know that system really well, like you said, because we've been working with them for so long, and we have such a great partnership. And then we can, like we said, we like to be bridge builders. We can build that bridge between you all and the Endowment, that can then get to the agency, and then you all really have people on the ground who can get to community members. So it's this odd square, basically, of being able to get resources on the ground. It's critical and it's much needed, and so everybody kind of plays their role, but we can kind of collaborate as we go along and really build something great.
Thank you. We will do the same. I mean, we have some states, one of which you are about to see after the panel, where we have outstanding staff in Louisiana. The state conservationist, the demonstration that we're showing today is about silvopasture, and you'll see how much talent, and that connection is so important for us, so we can also open that door for other farmers. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating, sending questions, and we're going to move on to our next session. Thank you, Delie. Thank you, Adrian.